Today we're looking at multi-step equations and more complicated equations that you might come across in your algebra learning. Again, quick reference to our inverse operations because we know we have to use them to find the value of the different pronumerals that we're dealing with today. Okay, so in this case, the unknown is x, and in some equations the unknown is z. It just means that we don't know what it is. So it doesn't have to be x every single time. Okay, let's begin. So we have z take 1 divided by 3 equals 5. So I'm going to start by writing the equation down. Now z has been subtracted by 1 and then divided by 3. So I'm going to start with the end of the equation again, because remember, we're trying to get that letter on its own, so we have to work backwards. Now the opposite of dividing by 3 is timesing both sides by 3. Therefore, z take 1 equals 15. Now we have subtracted 1, therefore we have to add 1 to both sides. Therefore, z equals 16. Let's look at the next one. Negative z. I'm going to put a 1 in front of that one. Again, you don't need to. Take 0.4 divided by 2 equals negative 0.5. Let's work from the end to that equation. Divided by 2, which means multiply both sides by 2. Therefore, we're left with negative 1z take 0.4 equals negative 0.5 times 2, which is negative 1. So we have negative 1z times z take 0.4 equals 1. I'm going to write that equation again because I don't have a lot of room. And the opposite of taking 0.4 is adding 0.4 to both sides. Therefore, negative 1z equals negative 1 plus 0.4, which is negative 0.6. We have a negative 1, so we have to divide both sides by negative 1. Therefore, z equals negative 0.6 divided by negative 1, which equals positive 0.6. Because we have two negatives makes a positive. I'm going to rub that out because we're running out of room. Let's look at the next one. 5x plus 1 divided by 3 equals 2. (5x plus 1 divided by 3 equals 2. Now the last thing that's happened is dividing by 3. So we're going to multiply both sides by 3. We're left with 5x plus 1 equals 6. The opposite of adding 1 is taking 1. So I'll write that equation again. Taking 1 from both sides. 5x equals 5. Remember, we only want 1x. Therefore, x equals 1, because 5 divided by 5 equals 1. You'll notice you need quite a bit of room to do this working out. 2 divided by x equals 1/2. We're going to use our knowledge from the previous video with these equivalent fractions. So we multiply the diagonals. 2 times 2 is 4. 1 times x is 1x. I'll write that again and get rid of the 1. So the question is solved because we already have one value of x and the answer is 4. Next question. Negative 10x take 4 divided by 3 equals 1. Again, deal with that last step. So we have to multiply both sides by 3. We're left with negative 10x take 4 equals 3. Again, working from the last part of the equation, take 4. The opposite of take 4 is adding both sides by 4. Negative 10x equals 7. We have to divide it by negative 10 because we only want 1x and we want that x to be positive. And 7 divided by negative 10 equals negative 0.7. So that x value does not always have to be a whole number, but you could substitute it in to check. 1 take 0.5x divided by 4 equals negative 2.5. Now these are starting to get a little more complex. Like I showed you in that video, I'm going to switch these around. and we're left with negative 0.5x plus 1 divided by 4 equals negative 2.5. Now you don't have to do that, that just works for me. Now the opposite of dividing by 4 is timesing both sides by 4. We're left with negative 0.5x plus 1 equals negative 10. The opposite of plus 1 is take 1 both sides. We have negative 0.5x equals negative 10 take 1, which is negative 11. We have a negative value of x, so we divide it by negative 0.5. That will give us a positive x, and negative 11 divided by negative 0.5 is 22. X equals 22. And our last one, 6 divided by x equals negative 1. Now, because we want that x on its own, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that negative 1 over 1. What we now have is equivalent fractions, and we can use the same strategy from previous. 6 times 1 is 6. Negative 1 times x is negative 1x. What do we do when we have a negative value for x? We divide it by negative, because two negatives make a positive, and 6 divided by negative 1 equals negative 6. And that is how you solve multi-step equations or more complicated equations. Thanks very much.